So I'm just thinking, one of the fun things that I like to also collect is, what are some of those pet peeves we have in communication? Like, what are some of those either terminologies or practices that have been there in the past with how we've communicated that just make you just great, some bad practices. And you've already said something that's food for thought, Chloe, the idea of using dollars, for depicting amounts of money when we know it fluctuates and we also don't use it in our countries. I know one of the things that I have been so adamant about with my colleagues that I work with that are in international spaces is, for example, the use of their weather patterns. We shall do this in the summer. We shall do this in winter. And I'm always like, I don't know what that is. It's always summer here or some kind of spring, So do you have some of those examples? I'm just curious about things you get upset about.
I do have a scenario dealing with an INGO. Where the stories, they sent their documentation team they came in their stories about us. But when they shared it on their website, there was nothing like girl up in the picture. But they were talking of how they're having all these safe spaces without even acknowledging the pattern on the ground. That is not ethical. Because much as you're giving me the money, it's important to acknowledge that there is pattern on the ground who manages this program, and they're having these safe spaces for girls, other than calling it your own because you're sub-granting to me. I think sometimes I struggle with the language that our narrative is quite different from the narrative that folks abroad use. So sometimes you take time to understand, what does this actually mean? What do they mean when they say this? And you're just trying to navigate the language and saying, okay, here we say this. So sometimes the language is different. So it's very important to really understand what do they mean here and what do we mean on our.
Patience, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I think on the words, I would say just general NGO words are so frustrating. Things like economic empowerment and like, I mean, for us, we're doing, we're supporting mothers of children with special needs. Primarily, we don't offer economic empowerment. So we did a business training with them, a business literacy, financial literacy training. And we were reporting that as we did a business financial literacy training, we hope that this will help them run businesses. And they're like, oh, so you empowered them economically. I'm like,
not so sure.
Not really. We just did a business and financial training. So I think some of the things in communication, like Monica said, is how they tell stories. And I realized this when I lived there for like a year, how they tell, we call it exaggeration. On this part of the continent, we call it exaggeration, but that's the normal way they talk. That's just how, like little things. So for example, you do a business training, it's called economic empowerment. You do, you talk to girls, it's called motivation or self-esteem building. You talk to a parent about whatever it is that they're going through, it's called psychosocial support. You have, like they use these terminologies that kind of like beef up and exaggerate what we do. And my struggle actually has been over the years doing what I say we do. So if I'm gonna say that we offer learning support, I want to be able to come and show you that a child has actually progressed because of the support. And so when we talk about that, if you look at, for example, now if you look at our website, we now just decided, we're going to say family support, because then we can then control the narrative of what we mean by family support. So I think that the way we define terms locally is very different from how they define terms, and the way we tell our stories, we are not braggers. I was in New York. I met the president of Malawi then, and then I was telling somebody as well. And then the way they described it, Patience brings the president to New York I was like, the man was doing his own. I happened to be in the same space with him. We did talk, but I'm not the one who brought him to New York. but you in Malawi, like leading the way, holding the president accountable. I'm like,
holding the president accountable. I'm sorry, that's funny.
Okay. I mean, I had like a 10-minute conversation with the man. I don't know. I don't even know if he's gonna remember me. So I think when we share our stories, the people that we share them to reshare those stories. And I think that's where a lot of the wording has been diluted on the people who carry our the people who are supposed to be our, what do they call this? Our partners, huh? Because they want to also show, like Monica was saying, they also want to show success through our work. So sometimes our success is not big enough for them to share, so they amplify it. And sometimes when amplify, it loses.
What amplify?
Yeah, it loses what it was originally supposed to be. So I guess that's also part of ethics. How do we make them understand that the way we tell stories is not wrong? Because that's the assumption. Huh? The assumption is that we are not shining a spotlight, or our storytelling, it needs work. It needs improvement. It needs, what's the word? Refining. Is our storytelling wrong? Is it to say that, we're just working with 50 chiefs instead of, we're working with a traditional authority that's responsible for 100,000 people? It's just 50 chiefs.
It's spot on. It's so much. It's so much of why we are putting this document together, and it's always an interesting one because we put in so much effort to understand how they communicate in order for us to respond to them. And I think what we're doing now with this initiative is to also, this needs to be a two-way street. You must also learn how we.
Yeah, they should understand how we communicate too. Like we are storytellers naturally. I don't think there's any African who can't tell a story. We grow up hearing stories. So for them to come and tell us how to do our stories is basically them being too lazy to learn our culture.